asking him a question at the end of the talk. He asked if there was anybody who had questions. And I said, how does one become sincere? Because in my own mind, I had viewed that sincerity was a key quality in achieving self-realization. And so he said, you become sincere by being sincere. And he said, it's you just have to want this Krishna consciousness. You have to sincerely want to surrender to the spiritual master and to Krishna. And he talked a little bit about those things. And I remember that, and I remember that on at least 2 occasions later on, once in Africa and once in India, when I came into the room to see Srila Prabhupada and there were some life members in the room, he would introduce me and he would say, this is my disciple Bhagavata, and he is very sincere. And that struck me. It touched my heart that Prabhupada always remembered that I wanted to be sincere. So we were all sitting there, and Srila Prabhupada was looking at all of us, and he picked up a set of beads. And he said, whose beads? So I had recognized they were mine. I said, they're mine, Srila Prabhupada. And then he turned and he said, and what is his name? Because they had the list of names in the book. Aravinda said, his name is Bhagavata. And he looked and he laughed. He said, oh, Bhagavata. And it was almost as if, like, he knew me or he was waiting for me to come or something. And he said, oh, Bhagavata. He said, there are 2 things. There is the book Bhagavat, and there is the person Bhagavat, those who follow the scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad-gita. He said, and you are Bhagavad Das, and you shall serve them both. So then he gave me the beads, and he had the beads in his hand. He said, now, what are the 4 rules? I said the 4 rules. And he said, and how many rounds a day must you chant? So at the time, I had been chanting 20 rounds a day. As an austerity, I wanted to chant more rounds. So I said, you're supposed to chant 16 rounds a day, but I am chanting 20. And Prabhupada looked at me, frowned like, don't be so egotistical. And then he gave me the beads. And so I had the beads, and I was chanting like this in front of Srila Prabhupada. And then this devotee, he picked up the next beads, and it was Subrata. He said, whose beads? And Subrata said, mine. So he went through the thing with him and told him what the name was and all that. And then he went to give him the beads, and he noticed he didn't have neck beads on. But just as Subrata went to get the beads, he took the beads back and said, where are your neck beads? And then he turned and he looked at me. I didn't have neck beads on. And I had the beads like this, and I took my beads and I went like this because I had waited a year and a half to get initiated, and I didn't want him to take the beads back. I went like this, and he said, he has no beads either. But then he didn't chastise us, and he turned to Hridayananda and Aravinda, and he said, and Sridham was also there. And he said, you're the senior disciples. You know that they can't get initiated without beads. Why don't they have neck beads? They are new, and you are senior, and you have been around, and you know all this. Why don't they have beads? And so everyone, we're sorry, we didn't see it. Everyone was so busy because of the lecture and the TV and everything. And so we'll make sure that they have the beads before the fire yagya tomorrow. And so he said, all right. But before fire yagya, they must have beads, neck beads. Then Srila Prabhupada asked if we had any questions, again, as he did after the lecture. So I had been studying, think I had read the Bhagavad-gita, that little blue one we had. I think by that time I had read it about 12 or 14 times. I was a very avid reader. And one of my favorite parts was the modes of material nature. And being very philosophical in nature, I wanted to understand some of the more refined and subtle points. And so I said to him, I'm confused because throughout your books and in your lectures you say that when you become a devotee, you're on the transcendental platform. But at the same time, you talk about being affected by the modes of material nature. And although I'm a devotee, and I'm practicing the principles of devotional service and experiencing a certain amount of transcendental pleasure, at the same time, I feel affected by the modes of material nature. So how is it that I could be on the transcendental platform and still be affected by the modes of material nature? And he smiled. He liked that question. He saw that it was thoughtful and introspective. And he said, that is a very good question. And he said, it is just like being on a boat. He said, when you're on the boat, no one can say you're not on the boat. You're on the boat. He said, but when you sail on the boat, sometimes very big waves will come and rock the boat. And so your position on the boat will not be very steady. He said, those waves are the modes of material nature, and the boat is the transcendental platform. You're on the transcendental platform, but sometimes the waves of material nature rock the boat, and your position is not steady. He said, so how will you become steady? He said, then you have to learn from the captain of the boat, that is the spiritual master, how to steer the boat. And if one learns expertly from the captain how to steer the boat, then even in the greatest storm, your position in the boat will become steady. He said, so similarly, on the transcendental platform, if you learn from the spiritual master how to steer the boat of transcendence through the ocean of material life, then you will become steady even in the greatest storm of the modes of material nature. I was extremely impressed at how Prabhupada had taken a complex situation and explained it with a very simple analogy. I remember coming to his room. At that time, I was appointed, Prabhupada, in Vrindavan, Prabhupada heard that they wouldn't give us the permit to put the building up in Bombay. So he had asked Bhagavata what we should do, and Bhagavata said that we should do civil disobedience like Lord Chaitanya. And so Prabhupada said, good. So then he demanded that all the devotees that were here from all over the world should come to Bombay and start preaching and do Sankirtan and civil disobedience. I remember he was very proud of Bhagavata. He said, just see this man's intelligence. Just see how intelligent he is. He has understood. I was very appreciative that he immediately came up with a spiritual solution. So we all went, everybody, all the Australian devotees, all the European devotees, all the American devotees, all the African devotees, everybody went to Bombay right after the Vrindavan festival. And there we were in Bombay. And my job, I was given the responsibility to go to speak with the ministers in order to get the products, the food. We were going to get food from America shipped into India to distribute to the people. So I was requested to go and speak with the different government officials to arrange permits for that. And then I was told to also collect donations of food and money so we could distribute prasadam to the public. And so that was what I did. And every day when I came home, I had to go all the way downtown on the train and come all the way back. When I came home in the evening, Prabhupada awaited my report. So, what is the news of today? So I said, well, I went and I collected $1,500 from this man, and well, rupees, 1,500 rupees from this man, and collected the sacks of grain from this person, and this and that. And very good, very good. He was always pleased to see any progress that we made. And then he would ask me about the ministers whom I had spoken to and what I had done. One day I actually got to speak to the chief minister of the state of Maharashtra. And he was very pleased. He was just beaming that, you know, here my American disciples are speaking with the highest government officials and arranging for so many things to be done. He really appreciated how resourceful we were and how adamant we were and tenacious about serving our spiritual master and getting to see all the different people that were involved. And he would praise me for my accomplishments, and I always felt so, you know, good that, you know, I was doing my spiritual master's work. And I remember one incident in which he had given me money to put in the bank. He gave me the bank form and the money. So I just took the money in the bank form and I put it in either my pocket or my bag, and he said, "Don't you count it?" So I said, "Well, you gave me the money, Srila Prabhupada." He said, "No. Whenever giving or taking money, always count." And I was thinking about, and this was just like, you know, a mundane affair in one sense, but yet it was Krishna's money, which was very important to Srila Prabhupada. But his point was that you never know what could happen. And so he felt like it wasn't just in matters of spiritual that he was training us. He was training us in mundane matters as well. He felt that all of the, you know, we were on one level educated, but on another level totally uneducated about the practicalities of the material world. Then, on another occasion, Prabhupada asked Satsvarupa Maharaj to go and get Tamal Krishna to come to the room. And I was just coming back from downtown. It was in the evening, and I was coming to give my report. So I was going to Prabhupada's room. I saw Satsvarupa Maharaj coming down, and he said, "Have you seen Tamal Krishna Goswami?" I said, "No, I just came back from downtown." I said, I think he must be in his room. So he said, "Okay." So he went over to his room. And I went up to Prabhupada's room, and when I opened the door, I saw that there was about 4 life members in the room with Prabhupada. So Prabhupada saw me, and he said, "Come in, sit down." I said, "Well, you're busy now, Prabhupada, with these men. I'll come back later." He said, "No, come in and sit down." So I said, "Oh boy, all right." I went inside, I went over to the corner, and I sat down. Then Tamal Krishna opened the door, and he saw the men, and Prabhupada said, "You, come in, sit down." And he came in, and he sat down. And the two of us are sitting there, and for the next half hour or so, Prabhupada just kept speaking to these Indian gentlemen. Didn't say a word to us. Preaching. And then they all, you know, thanked Prabhupada, offered obeisances, got up, and walked out. So when they left, Prabhupada said to us, if you do not come here in the evening and listen to me preach to these gentlemen, then how will you learn how to preach? You must come and sit here and listen to me preach so that you learn the art of how to explain this philosophy to such important and wealthy men in the community. So here again, Prabhupada was teaching, he was training everything. It was just constant education. And he saw that we were going to be his leaders on some level or another. And therefore, he wanted us to learn. So then he asked us, he said, can you quote me this verse? So the two of us looked at each other. I was looking at him. I thought, all right, tomorrow Krishna Goswami, he'll quote the verse. And he was looking at me, and he thought, Bhagavad will do it. Neither of us knew the verse. Then Prabhupada said, just see, you are not reading my books. He said, every day you have to read my books. You have to study my books and learn my books, just like a lawyer learns the law books. He said, you must know everything, chapter and verse. He said, if you do not know, how will you preach? How will you teach these men unless you know my books? Every day you have to read my books. And he said, do you know that every day even I read my own books? And both of us were looking at it. He said, do you know why I read my books? Again, we didn't want to venture any answers because we already realized we were in a lose-lose situation. It was like nothing we could say was going to be right. So he said, I read my books every day because even I learn something new when I read my books. He said, do you know why I learn something new when I read my books? He said, because these are not my books. I do not write these books. And he spoke, and when he started to speak at this moment, it was like something came over him. It was like so mystical. He said every morning, he had his hand up like this. You know how Prabhupada used to put up his hand like this? Every morning, when I sit here to read my books, to write my books, Krishna comes personally and he dictates to me what to write. He said, and so I simply take dictation from Krishna and I write these books. He said, therefore, when I read them, even I learn something. And it was like so dramatic the way he said it. And we just felt the weight. And I was sitting there, I was thinking, I'm speaking with the person who's speaking with God. He's there. He's right next to God. I'm only one person removed from God. It's so close. And yet I knew, because of the state of my own consciousness, how far away I actually was. But that by some grace, I was being placed just right next to God by being with Prabhupada. It was just so amazing. One day, Satsvarupa couldn't do Prabhupada's massage. I had been sitting in the room when he mentioned this. Satsvarupa Maharaj said, I won't be able to do your massage today. And whoever else it was wouldn't be available. So I looked up at Srila Prabhupada and I said, well, I have very big hands and I am strong. I can give you a good massage. So Prabhupada said, okay. He said, you can do that. You give me a massage. So then I came up and I was massaging Srila Prabhupada. And, everyone told me, you have to massage him strong. So I'm massaging him, I'm doing his head, and he said, in a very deep voice, which it shook me to the core of my being. "You are doing it too hard." I was shocked, So I tried to lighten up a little bit, but I was massaging his whole body. And during the course of the massage, I remember these ants were coming. And they started to go to climb on his feet. So I stopped massaging him and I'm going like this to move the ants. So Prabhupada looked and said, "What are you doing? Why have you stopped the massage?" I said, "Oh, there's some ants, Srila Prabhupada, they're coming on your feet." So he looked over and he said, "They will not bother me. They will go away by themselves." And he just waved his hand over the ants. Now, there must have been 20 or so ants, and they were all in a disorganized pile, ready to get up on his mat and onto his feet. And he waved his hand over them. And I swear, these ants immediately got into a single file line and marched in the opposite direction. I thought, oh, unbelievable. He has complete control over nature. It's whatever he wills happens. And, I finished the massage and everything. But I could tell Prabhupada felt I was doing it a little too hard. So a couple of days later, when we're on the Krishna book, the morning walk, and they're reading the Krishna book, so they're reading about Krishna's fighting with the wrestlers. So it said, and these two wrestlers came out, and they were both fully grown men with bodies like solid slabs of stone. Prabhupada stopped. He picked up his cane, and he stuck it out, and he pointed it to me, and he said, you are like those wrestlers. And everyone laughed. I never massaged Prabhupada again, suffice to say. Another time in Bombay during this period, this devotee brought two of these Swami Narayan sannyasis to see Prabhupada. And in the Swami Narayan, a sannyasi is never allowed to look even at the face of a woman. If they do, they have to fast the next day. So it's in the temples, the Swami Narayan temples, the women are behind a curtain that no one can see beyond that curtain. They have to just listen from the other side. So we brought them up to Prabhupada's room, and at the time, he was in the room with Jasomati Nandan and Jasomati Nandan's elderly mother. I mean, the woman must have been 70 years old. She was just an old, wrinkled Indian woman. And Prabhupada was talking with her. And so the two sannyasis, we opened the door and they look and they see this old woman and they cover their faces and, they became very disturbed. So we said, well, we'll just wait, Prabhupada will be finished soon and then you can. So they went back downstairs and they waited in this room, and then the woman came out and we went upstairs again. And I told Prabhupada, I said, the Swami Narayan sannyasis are here and they have a rule in their parampara never to look at the face of a woman when you take sannyas. So they saw Jasomati Nandan's mother, they wouldn't come. He said, okay. He said, you bring them, I will talk with them. So we brought them up, and they come and they sit in front of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada says, I'm so sorry. He was very respectful. I'm so sorry, he said, but it was one of my leading students' elderly mother who came to see me. So I gave her some of my time while he was present in the room. And my servant was here, my sannyasi servant. They said, oh, but we do not see. We do not. All right, he said. Lord Chaitanya was very strict. I understand. So then Prabhupada started to ask them questions about their religion. And immediately, the confrontation began. And they started saying that the Swami Narayan, he was God. And so he said, so where is it in Srimad Bhagavatam that Swami Narayan is God? Where is it stated Swami Narayan is coming? I have not seen. I have seen Rama, I have seen Nrsimha, I have seen Varaha, I have seen Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All are stated there in Bhagavatam, but where is Swami Narayan? No, it is there in this book. I don't know, what book is that? Who has written that book? It is Vedas? It is written by Vyas? No, such and such Swami. Oh, that Swami. Who is he? And what parampara he is from? And Prabhupada was showing us how to preach. And he was going on and on. And he was just hammering these. And he wasn't going to let them go for a second. They had tried to embarrass him by making him feel like he was less than them because he was talking to an elderly woman. And he was going to show them that he was transcendental to talking to an elderly woman because he knew the philosophy that they didn't understand. And he cut them to ribbons. And they walked out of there. It was like their heads had been in a ping pong game. They had been completely worked over. So they said, okay, well, we're going to leave, Swamiji. We've had enough now. And they got up and they walked out. And I was hysterical. I said, Srila Prabhupada, you are the greatest. I said, just see how every question, and then I started going on and on and on. And then Prabhupada said, oh, so you appreciate it? I said, yes. I was so, you just everything that they said, you had an answer for, and you had a verse, and you said everything. He said, yes, this is the way to preach. So you like this preaching? I said, oh, yes. You're the greatest, Srila Prabhupada. No one can defeat you. You're the best. Prabhupada said, oh, so you think so? No, not just I think. And everyone was going there, or everyone was in the room there. Oh, yes, Prabhupada is the best. Prabhupada is the greatest. I said, oh, maybe. He was just enjoying that. He was being humble, but he was enjoying the whole thing. I was sitting with Srila Prabhupada on the top of the roof above his apartment in Bombay. And it was in the evening. And we sat there, I think, up until we were alone, just he and I. I don't remember whether it was an hour or 2 hours. It appeared timeless. And we had been on that roof until maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night alone. And we were just talking. And he was telling me about Indian history, about Gandhi. And he said that Gandhi had the proper plan for revitalizing India. And he started to explain. He said Gandhi never wanted big cities. He never wanted factories to open up. He never liked that. He said that Gandhi was concerned that people had the basic necessities of life in the villages. And that his plan was to first arrange for everyone to have food, clothing, education, good water supply, religious training, and some occupation, a craft, making cloth or jewelry or something of that nature. He said that these were the basic principles that Gandhi lived by. And he felt that if in every village the basic needs of the people were met through the simple, self-sufficient principles, that then later on if they wanted to develop some factories here and there, that could be done. He said, but he said, Sardar Patel and Nehru, they betrayed him. That was his opinion, that was his vision of it. He said they saw that India's future was through factories, that they would bring in all these factories and things of that nature and create jobs for everyone. He said, now look what has happened. So all these young men have left their landed property. They are not growing food anymore. They have come to the cities. They are living in shanty towns. They are living in squalor, working in the factory for only a few rupees, not making enough money even for a living. He said they've spoiled everything. Then he started to lament. He was lamenting. He said, India's become spoiled by all of this Western civilization. He said, Gandhi wanted simple life. He said, that is the real way. He said, just self-sufficient life. He said, Chittaranjan Das, he also wanted. And then he became like, I never seen him like this. And he said, I loved Gandhi. I loved Chittaranjan Das. They wanted to save India. He said, but it was all spoiled by these politicians. And then the next morning, we were on the morning walk. And we were walking down the beach. And I was on one side of Srila Prabhupada. And usually when some people would come to enter into the march down the beach, Prabhupada would turn to them as a respect and he would bow and offer his respect like this, like that. Prabhupada was always the gentleman, the perfect gentleman. And so when we seemed to be walking an extraordinarily long distance. I mean, he never usually walked this far down the beach. And at a certain point, I saw him finally go like this. Now, I was on this side of him, and he had turned this way and went like this. And so I turned to look to see who was coming, and there was nobody. But in the distance, there was the statue of Gandhi with his stick standing there. Prabhupada had walked this entire distance to get down there to offer some respect to this statue of Gandhi, at least as I had perceived, because there was nobody there. And he had turned to go like this. And everyone was looking to see what he was doing. Now, nobody else had been with me the night before, so it dawned on me why he had done what he did. I knew why. Nobody else knew. So then we turned around and we walked back, and some other people came. And by divine arrangement, someone started talking about Gandhi. And Prabhupada turns to him and he said, what is this idea of Gandhi? This is all nonsense. Gandhi is this and that. And then on and on and on. And then he turned and he looked at me and he smiled. And I thought, this is a little secret that he had shared with me. I felt so honored. But at the same time, he's letting me know, you have to know what to say and when to say it and how to say it in order to preach this philosophy. And so he was letting me know that. He was showing me that. Because he knew that I knew what was going on when he did what he did that morning and from the night before. But he wanted me to also be aware how to preach. We had the first African disciples at that time. There was 3 or 4 of them living with Srila Prabhupada, living in the house of Prabhupada. And so Prabhupada one day called for Brahmananda to come to the room, and he said, "Where are my clothes?" So Prabhupada said, "Well, I don't know. What happened?" He said, "Well, yesterday the servant came, the African servant. I gave him my clothes to wash, and he said he would bring them in." So then they called the African servant, so he came in. He said, "Where are my clothes?" So he said, "I don't know. I washed them, I put them on the line, and now they're gone." So Prabhupada said, "Oh, someone has stolen my clothes?" So Brahmananda said, "Well, sometimes there's thieves, and we didn't have the back door locked, so maybe they came in and stole the clothes," because Prabhupada had all these silk clothes. So they must have thought it was valuable and stole it. So Prabhupada laughed. He said, "Oh, they are stealing even these pieces of silk from a sannyasi." So he had two of the shoulder pad, the shoulder pieces of cloth. So he put one over the top and the other one on the bottom, and his legs were sticking through, and it was very uncomfortable. So then the next morning, he has Bhagavatam class, and all the African disciples come in to sit down and hear Prabhupada give Bhagavatam class. So Prabhupada's sitting there looking at the book, and he looks up and he says, "You're wearing my shirt. You're wearing my dhoti. You're wearing my top." And Brahmananda got furious. He started disrobing them in front of Prabhupada. He's taking off the shirts. He's taking off the dhotis. They're going, "Get what? You took the spiritual master's clothes? What's the matter with you?" And Prabhupada was laughing and laughing. Prabhupada was hysterical. He's just sitting here like, "Oh, they're taking my clothes. Look there." He thought it was actually humorous that they were all wearing his clothes. There were some other things that happened. I remember they interviewed Prabhupada because he had been at a big pandal. And so the BBC was interviewing him. And what had happened was that previously, just before he had started the lecture program, the country next to us, Tanzania, the communists had taken over. And they had a midnight session of Congress, and the next day there was a law passed that no one owned property in the state of Tanzania anymore. All the property was now owned by the state, and you had to pay rent to the state. And you had no ownership. And Prabhupada was furious. He said that this was tantamount to, this was thievery. This was out and out stealing. That people work hard, they earn money, they buy property, they develop an estate, and then the government just steals it from them like rogues. He said these are the worst rogues and thieves and rascals, he said. And at that time, the BBC, one day during this, they interviewed him. And they said, what is your message? And he started talking about, he said, "My message is that I want to kick out all these rogues and rascals and thieves and these politicians. They're all rascals," he said. "There are no good politicians. They're all rogues. The whole world is filled with rogues and thieves. They are stealing the hard-earned money of the people. They are stealing their land. They are stealing their lifeblood." He said they're bloodsuckers. And Prabhupada was so vehement. He said a real king is the protector of the people. He said a real king will see that everyone is living nicely, that all people have food, that all people have clothing, that all people have care and attention and medical needs. Everything that is needed will be provided by the king. The king takes so much care and responsibility that if anyone dies, he feels personally responsible that they have died too young, or if the son dies before the father, he feels that it is personal responsibility for such events. And here these men, they are just stealing. He said there are no qualified people to be king in this world. We need a qualified king. He should have honesty and decency and integrity. Prabhupada was talking about all the qualities of a king, like Maharaj Yudhisthira, like Ram, like, and he was going on and on. So the man said, do you see that there's anybody in the world that has such qualifications that could be king of the world? And just when he said that, the guy who had the videotape, the tape ran out. But the guy who was interviewing didn't know it. And Prabhupada looked at him, put his cane on the ground, and he said, yes, me. Just like that. And he was qualified to be king of the world. And the look on the interviewer's face was a complete shock. But Prabhupada realized that nobody else in the world had the qualifications, that only the pure devotee could do this. One morning he was talking with us about his vision of what he wanted to do with this ISKCON movement. And he said that he wanted to first buy all the land in Mayapur and establish a self-sufficient community in which they were completely independent of any needs from outside of the entire island of Mayapur. He said once that was established, he would then declare independence from India and secede from the country and make his own country the country of Mayapur. He said, and then his temples around the world would become embassies for the country of Mayapur, and the presidents would be ambassadors. He said, and then we would print our own money. One Chaitanya, he said, I will call them Chaitanyas. There will be one Chaitanya, 5 Chaitanyas, 10 Chaitanyas. He said, and we will have our own currency. And then we will make devotional items and export them all over the world. And that will be our export business. And Prabhupada had a vision of his own country, his own embassies, his own ambassadors, his own monetary system, his own economic system, his own export production. I mean, sometimes we don't realize how big Prabhupada was actually thinking, how grand he wanted this mission to be. And I remember, when I remember these discussions, I think, we're so far away from where he really wanted to take this movement, how much harder we really need to work.
Je anilo